"I took it off, please," she cried. The rancher froze and made his move. Wild West stories. Clara adjusted the strap of her worn leather satchel and looked out at the long dirt road that led to Cedar Creek Ranch. She had never been this far from her small town before, and the thought of spending the summer working on a ranch made her stomach flutter with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Her father had insisted that hard work would teach her discipline, and Clara, ever curious and adventurous, had agreed. Still, the thought of facing her first day alone in a place as vast and untamed as Cedar Creek Ranch filled her with apprehension. As she walked, the soft crunch of her boots against the gravel seemed louder in the quiet morning. The air smelled of fresh grass and the faint tang of horses, a smell both foreign and strangely comforting. Clara had spent her life in the town, surrounded by cobblestone streets, shopkeepers calling out their wares, and the constant chatter of neighbors. The open land with its rolling hills and endless sky was a different world entirely. She paused to take it all in, breathing deeply, trying to calm the nervous energy that had settled in her chest. The ranch itself was visible in the distance, a cluster of wooden buildings surrounded by sturdy fences that stretched as far as the eye could see. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney of the main house, and the early morning light glinted off the metal roofs of the barns. Clara quickened her pace, eager to make a good impression, yet unsure of how she would be received. She had heard stories about the rancher Jed, a man of few words and a reputation for being strict but fair. She wasn't sure what to expect from him, and the uncertainty added to the fluttering in her stomach. As she approached the gate, a horse whinnied in the distance, its sound carrying over the quiet plains. Clara's heart jumped, and she hurried a few steps, feeling suddenly small under the vast sky. A large brown horse trotted towards her, its mane catching the morning light. It belonged to the ranch, she realized, and the sight reminded her that this summer would be nothing like the quiet streets of her town. Here, every day would demand effort, courage, and perhaps a little bit of daring. Jed appeared then, stepping out of the main house. He was a tall man, his frame strong and weathered from years of working the land. His eyes, sharp and observant, took in Clara at once. She felt a momentary pang of self-consciousness, wondering if he could see the uncertainty written across her face. Jed didn't speak immediately, letting the quiet stretch for a few moments as if measuring her resolve. Then, in a voice calm but firm, he said, "You must be Clara. Welcome to Cedar Creek Ranch." Clara nodded, her voice catching slightly. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Jed gave a small nod, a brief gesture that seemed almost dismissive, but Clara sensed the underlying assessment. He was watching her carefully, noting her posture, her confidence, and her nerves. "You'll start in the barn," he said. "We've got a lot to do, and the horses need tending. Follow me." Clara followed him across the yard, her boots leaving soft impressions in the dusty ground. The barn loomed ahead, a large wooden structure with wide doors that creaked slightly as Jed pushed them open. Inside, the smell of hay and animals filled the air, strong and earthy. Horses moved in their stalls, some shifting nervously at the intrusion of strangers, others calm and indifferent. Clara's eyes widened as she took in the scene. The barn was bigger than anything she had imagined, filled with animals, equipment, and the faint noise of activity that promised long, busy days ahead. Jed handed her a brush and a bucket of feed. "Start with the horses in the east stalls," he instructed. "Check their water, feed them, and make sure they're calm before riding." His voice was steady, unhurried, but there was an edge of expectation. Clara nodded again, trying to memorize every detail of his instructions. She had spent time with animals before, but nothing like this. These horses were powerful, restless creatures, and she knew she would have to earn their trust as much as Jed's. She moved carefully to the first stall, her hands trembling slightly as she reached out to touch the horse. It nickered softly, leaning into her hand, and Clara felt a surge of relief. Perhaps she could do this after all. She repeated the process with the other horses, her confidence growing as she worked. She discovered that caring for them was not just about feeding and brushing. It required observation, patience, and the ability to understand their moods and reactions. By mid-morning, Clara's arms were sore from lifting buckets of water and spreading hay, but her spirit was lifted. She was learning quickly, and the sense of accomplishment warmed her like the sun rising higher in the sky. Jed watched from the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. He didn't speak, but Clara sensed his approval in the brief nods he gave as he observed her handling the horses. Just as she was finishing with the last stall, a sudden gust of wind rattled the barn doors. Clara jumped, spilling a small amount of feed. Outside, dark clouds were gathering quickly over the plains, and she felt a ripple of concern. Storms came fast in this part of the country, and a summer rain could be dangerous if one was caught unprepared. She looked toward Jed, who had already stepped outside, scanning the horizon. "Looks like we're in for a storm," he called over his shoulder. "Help me close the gates and secure the animals." The next hour was a whirlwind of activity. Clara and Jed worked side by side, pulling gates closed, tying horses to secure posts, and moving the more restless animals to safer stalls. The wind picked up, rattling the barn and tugging at their clothes, and the first drops of rain began to fall. The storm approached faster than Clara expected, and the pounding of rain on the roof made her heart race. Inside the barn, the horses were restless, shifting nervously and stamping their hooves. Clara moved quickly, speaking to them in soft, calming tones, trying to ease their anxiety. She realized that the barn, which had felt so welcoming in the morning, now seemed much more intimidating. The sound of the storm, the smell of wet hay, and the movement of the animals created a tense, almost chaotic atmosphere. She glanced at Jed, who was handling a particularly stubborn stallion with calm precision. His movements were deliberate, careful, and controlled, showing years of experience. Clara felt a flicker of admiration. There was something reassuring about the way he handled the animals and the storm at the same time. The storm intensified, and Clara found herself moving faster than she had expected, tying a loose halter and checking the water troughs. A sudden noise, a loud thump from the far end of the barn, made her spin around. A horse had kicked over a bucket, scattering feed everywhere. Clara froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Jed noticed immediately, walking over to steady the horse and calm Clara. "It's all right," he said, his voice steady. "Keep calm and the animals will follow your lead." She nodded, taking a deep breath, and tried again. Slowly, carefully, she worked with the horse, gently guiding it back into position and brushing off the spilled feed. The moment tested her nerves, but she managed it and the horse settled. Clara felt a surge of pride. She had faced the chaos and had not faltered. By late morning, the storm passed, leaving a fresh, clean scent in the air and puddles reflecting the sunlight that broke through the clouds. Clara leaned against a post, catching her breath, and realized how much she had already learned in just a few hours. The ranch was challenging, unpredictable, and exhausting, but it was also invigorating. She felt a connection to the land, to the animals, and even to Jed, whose quiet guidance had helped her navigate her first real test. Jed finally spoke, breaking the comfortable silence. "You're learning fast," he said. "Keep this up and you'll do well here." Clara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. His words were simple, but they carried weight. In this harsh, beautiful place, approval was earned, not given freely. She realized that she was beginning to understand not just the work of the ranch, but the rhythm of life here, the balance of patience, courage, and respect for the land and its creatures. As she gathered the last of the equipment and prepared to return to the main house for a brief rest and lunch, Clara felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She knew the days ahead would be long and challenging, filled with physical labor, unexpected obstacles, and lessons she could not yet imagine. But for the first time, she felt a true sense of belonging, as though Cedar Creek Ranch, wild and untamed as it was, might just be a place where she could grow stronger, braver, and more confident than she had ever been before. The summer was just beginning, and Clara could not yet know the adventures, the challenges, or the friendships that lay ahead. But she knew this. She had arrived ready to face whatever came her way, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly alive in the wild, wide world before her. The day after the storm, the sky cleared into a brilliant blue, and the sun warmed the plains with a gentle golden light. Clara woke early, the events of the previous day still vivid in her mind. She could hardly believe how quickly she had been thrown into the rhythm of ranch life, and she felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. Today, Jed had mentioned, would be even busier. There was work to do outside with the horses, fences to inspect, and the beginnings of a cattle drive to prepare. Clara dressed quickly, tucking her hair beneath a wide-brimmed hat and pulling on her worn boots, ready to face the challenges ahead. As she stepped outside, the ranch was already alive with activity. The early morning air was filled with the sounds of horses neighing, roosters crowing, and the soft murmur of workers moving about. Jed was already near the stables, inspecting the grounds with a practiced eye. He glanced up as Clara approached, his expression unreadable, but she sensed a flicker of approval in the slight nod he gave her. "Ready for another day?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. Clara nodded enthusiastically, gripping the edge of her satchel tightly. "Yes, sir." "I'm ready." Jed's gaze swept over the ranch, noting the tasks that needed attention. "Good. We've got a few things to take care of before the cattle drive later. The horses need exercise, the fences need checking, and there's a problem in the east pen that needs fixing." He didn't elaborate, leaving Clara to follow him closely, absorbing every detail of the sprawling ranch. They began with the horses. Clara had grown more confident after yesterday, and she moved with more ease as she brushed them and led them to the small paddock. Jed observed silently, offering occasional advice. "Keep your movements calm and predictable," he said. "Horses respond to confidence and clarity. Hesitation confuses them." Clara nodded, repeating his instructions in her mind. She approached the largest horse first, a black stallion with a fiery temperament. He stomped and tossed his head, but Clara kept her voice steady, her movements smooth. Gradually, the horse calmed, leaning into her touch, and a small smile spread across her face. Jed's eyes met hers for a brief moment, and she thought she saw approval there, though it was subtle and fleeting. Once the horses were exercised and content, Jed led Clara toward the east pen. As they drew closer, the air felt charged with tension. Clara noticed a group of horses huddled together, agitated and restless. One of them, a large brown mare, had her leg caught in the fence. Clara's heart leapt into her throat. The mare was struggling, and each movement made her entangled more dangerously. "Stay calm," Jed said, his voice low but firm. "I'll guide you," Clara nodded, taking a deep breath. She approached slowly, careful not to startle the mare further. Jed moved with her, steadying the animal and speaking softly to it in low tones that Clara couldn't fully understand but could see had an effect. The mare's movement slowed slightly, though she still strained against the fence. Clara felt a pang of fear. What if she did something wrong? Jed crouched near the mare's legs, examining the tangle carefully. "We need to free her, but gently. Quick movements will make her panic." Clara watched his every motion, trying to mirror his calm confidence. With precise movements, he loosened the fence and guided the mare out, carefully keeping her from thrashing. Clara's hands trembled slightly, but she followed his instructions to the letter. Slowly, the mare was freed, stepping back to safety. "Good work," Jed said, his tone even but carrying a note of satisfaction. Clara exhaled, relief washing over her. The tension that had gripped her chest moments before eased, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. She realized that working on the ranch was about more than physical labor. It was about presence, awareness, and understanding the subtle signals of the animals. Once the east pen was secure, Jed and Clara moved to inspect the fences along the northern edge of the property. The wind had picked up again, though not with the ferocity of the storm, and it carried the scent of wild grass and distant rain. Clara found herself growing stronger, her movements more assured. She climbed over fences, checked posts, and mended broken rails with determination. Jed followed her quietly, occasionally offering guidance. How to knot rope securely, how to test the strength of a post, how to anticipate potential trouble spots before they became real problems. By midday, the sun was high and hot, and Clara felt the familiar ache in her arms and legs. She welcomed it. It was the ache of real effort, of work that challenged both body and mind. Jed finally motioned toward the main house. "Take a short break," he said. "Eat, drink some water, then we'll start preparing for the cattle drive." Clara accepted gratefully, taking a small meal of bread and dried fruit while sitting on the porch steps. She watched the ranch from this vantage point, noticing details she hadn't before. The way the sunlight glinted off the water troughs, the way the horses moved in the paddocks, the soft murmur of wind through the grass. There was a rhythm here, a flow to the land and the animals that she hadn't experienced in the town. She felt herself settling into it, beginning to understand what it meant to be part of this wild, challenging environment. After a brief rest, Jed signaled that it was time to begin the cattle drive preparations. Clara followed him to the herd, where dozens of cattle grazed lazily under the sun. Jed's voice carried across the field, calling the animals and giving directions to the ranch hands. Clara watched intently, absorbing his methods. Moving cattle was not just about driving them from one place to another. It required strategy, timing, and an understanding of their instincts. Clara took her place at the edge of the herd, learning to anticipate their movements. Jed stayed close, offering instructions in calm, deliberate tones. "Keep a steady pace," he said. "Don't let them scatter. Watch their ears and tails. Those are signs of mood and intent." Clara nodded, doing her best to follow his guidance. It was exhausting work, both physically and mentally, but she felt a surge of satisfaction as the herd responded to her direction. Suddenly, one of the younger calves bolted toward the fence, spooked by a bird taking flight nearby. Clara's heart raced as she moved quickly to intercept it, her instincts guiding her. Jed was beside her in an instant, helping to corral the animal back to the group. "Good reflexes," he said. Clara smiled, feeling the weight of his approval. Moments like this, she realized, were what made the work so demanding and so rewarding. As the afternoon wore on, the task grew more complicated. Clouds gathered once again on the horizon, hinting at another storm. Clara's stomach tightened at the sight, remembering the chaos of the previous day. Jed noticed her glance and offered a reassuring nod. "Stay focused," he said. "If we handle this calmly, we'll manage just fine." The cattle began to move as planned, but a sudden gust of wind sent a loose tarp flying across the field, startling some of the animals. Clara froze for a moment, her mind racing, but Jed's steady presence reminded her to act. Together, they guided the herd back into formation, speaking to them in low, soothing tones and gently nudging them in the right direction. By the time the sun began to sink toward the horizon, the herd was secured in a safe pen, calm once more. Clara's body ached from the day's work, but her spirit soared. She had faced challenges she could never have imagined, learned skills she had only read about, and grown more confident with every decision she made. Jed, observing her from across the pen, gave a subtle nod of approval. Clara realized that she was no longer just a visitor at Cedar Creek Ranch. She was becoming part of it, learning to read the land, the animals, and even the people who called it home. As evening settled over the ranch, the sky painted in hues of pink and gold, Clara stood near the fence, watching the cattle graze peacefully. The wind carried the scent of fresh grass and rain, and for a moment, everything felt in harmony. She reflected on the day, the challenges, the lessons, the small victories, and felt a sense of pride and belonging that she had never known before. Jed approached, his shadow long in the fading light. "You did well today," he said quietly. "Storms, wild horses, unpredictable animals, you handled it all. That's not something everyone can do." Clara's heart lifted at his words. In the quiet, vast expanse of Cedar Creek Ranch, she realized that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined, and that this summer would teach her lessons she would carry for the rest of her life. The sun disappeared behind the hills, leaving the ranch bathed in twilight. Clara knew that more storms and challenges awaited, but she also knew that she was ready. The bond she was forming with the land, the animals, and Jed himself was growing stronger every day, and she felt a determination to face whatever came next with courage, patience, and resolve. For the first time since arriving, Clara felt that Cedar Creek Ranch was no longer intimidating. It was alive, full of lessons, trials, and possibilities. And she was ready to embrace every single one. The following morning, the sky was pale with early light, and the air carried the crisp freshness that only came after a night of rain. Clara rose before sunrise, her muscles still aching pleasantly from the previous day's labor. She had begun to realize that life on Cedar Creek Ranch demanded both physical strength and mental endurance, and she welcomed the challenge. Today, Jed had said, they would focus on the barn and the horses, as one of the older mares had become restless and unpredictable. Clara felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. As she made her way to the barn, the smell of wet earth and fresh hay greeted her, familiar and oddly comforting. Jed was already there, moving among the stalls with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent decades working with animals. The mare in question, a chestnut with a striking white stripe down her nose, was pacing nervously in her stall, tossing her head and stamping her hooves. Clara stopped for a moment, studying the animal. She could feel its unease and sensed that it would take patience and care to calm her. Jed noticed her hesitation and gave a small nod. "She's been acting up since the storm," he explained. "Don't approach her too quickly. Let her see you, then move slowly." Clara took a deep breath and stepped closer, keeping her movements smooth and deliberate. The mare's ears twitched as she noticed Clara, but instead of bolting, she took a cautious step back. Clara spoke softly, almost whispering, trying to soothe both herself and the animal. For nearly an hour, Clara worked with the mare, following Jed's instructions carefully. She brushed her gently, spoke in calm tones, and observed every flick of the ears, every shift of weight. Slowly, the mare's restlessness began to ease, though her eyes remained wide and alert. Clara felt her own heartbeat slow, a rhythm matching the careful pace of her efforts. Jed watched silently, stepping in only when necessary to guide her hands or adjust her posture. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from the far side of the barn, startling both Clara and the mare. A bale of hay had fallen and the mare jumped, her hooves scraping the wooden floor. Clara froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Jed's calm voice broke through the tension. "Steady," he said. "Keep your movements slow, speak to her. Don't panic." Clara nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she continued to brush the mare, speaking softly. Gradually, the horse's breathing slowed, her muscles relaxing under Clara's careful touch. "Good," Jed said quietly. "You handled that well." Clara exhaled, relief washing over her. The barn, which had seemed intimidating in the early morning, now felt like a place of possibility. She was learning not only how to care for the animals but also how to trust her instincts and remain calm under pressure. As the morning passed, Jed assigned Clara additional tasks. She was to check the water troughs, sweep the barn, and ensure all the horses had enough feed. It was hard work, but Clara had grown stronger and more confident. She moved with purpose, her eyes scanning for potential problems and her hands steady as she carried buckets and arranged hay. Jed occasionally offered guidance, but he largely let her take the lead. Clara could feel herself earning his respect, though he never voiced it directly. The quiet approval, she realized, was more meaningful than words. Mid-morning brought a new challenge. A young colt had managed to slip out of his pen and was wandering near the barn doors. Clara spotted him immediately, her heart leaping. The colt was nervous, stamping and tossing his head, and if he ran into the wrong place, he could hurt himself or others. Clara called out softly, trying to guide him back. Jed appeared beside her, moving with the same calm precision he had demonstrated countless times before. Together, they coaxed the colt back toward safety, using a combination of soft words and gentle guidance. Once the colt was secured, Clara leaned against the post, catching her breath. Her muscles ached, but the exhilaration of success filled her with energy. She realized that every challenge on the ranch required a combination of observation, patience, and courage. The animals were unpredictable, the weather could change in an instant, and the land itself demanded respect. Clara felt herself growing in ways she had never anticipated. The day continued with a series of small but meaningful tasks. Clara cleaned tack, repaired a broken fence near the stables, and helped Jed organize feed for the coming days. Each task was physically demanding, but it also required mental focus. She had to anticipate the needs of the animals, consider the weather, and stay alert to any sudden changes. The barn, which had seemed overwhelming on her first day, was now a place where she felt capable and competent. By late afternoon, clouds began to gather again, dark and heavy, promising another storm. Clara's heart tightened as she recalled the chaos of the previous day. Jed noticed her glance and gave a reassuring nod. "Stay focused," he said. "If we keep our heads, the animals will be fine." Clara nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also a sense of confidence she hadn't known she possessed. The first drops of rain began to fall as they finished securing the horses in their stalls. The mare, which had been restless all day, was finally calm, standing quietly in her pen. Clara moved among the other animals, checking halters, filling water troughs, and ensuring that all doors and gates were secure. Jed's voice was calm and steady throughout, guiding her when necessary but largely letting her handle the situation. Clara felt a surge of pride. She was no longer just learning. She was participating, contributing, and making a difference on the ranch. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind burst through the barn doors, sending loose straw swirling in the air. A small horse, spooked by the sudden movement, bolted toward the far end of the barn. Clara's heart raced as she moved quickly to intercept it. Jed was at her side in an instant, guiding her hands and helping to calm the animal. Together, they managed to steady the horse, coaxing it back to its stall with gentle words and firm, controlled movements. Clara's arms ached from the effort, and sweat dripped from her brow, but she felt exhilarated. The storm outside had grown stronger, and the barn was alive with movement and sound, yet she had faced the chaos and emerged successful. Jed gave a brief nod of approval, a simple gesture that filled Clara with quiet pride. She realized that the bond she was forming with the animals, and with Jed himself, was built on trust, patience, and shared effort. As the afternoon wore on, the storm intensified. Rain pelted the barn roof, and wind rattled the wooden beams. Clara moved carefully among the stalls, attending to the animals, making sure none were frightened or in danger. The mare, which had been the source of so much tension earlier, now stood quietly, her head lowered and her breathing steady. Clara smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. She had learned to remain calm in the face of fear, to anticipate the needs of the animals, and to trust herself. Jed observed silently, occasionally stepping in to adjust a halter or calm a nervous horse. Clara noticed that he rarely praised her directly, but his steady presence and occasional nods spoke volumes. She understood that on the ranch, respect was earned through action, not words. Each successful task, each moment of composure under pressure, built trust and confidence, not only in her abilities but in her place on the ranch. By early evening, the storm began to pass, leaving a fresh, clean scent in the air. Clara and Jed stepped outside briefly, surveying the barn and the surrounding paddocks. The animals were calm, the gates secure, and the land peaceful once more. Clara's body was tired, but her spirit was invigorated. She had faced the challenges of the day, and she had succeeded. More importantly, she had learned something fundamental about herself. She was capable of handling more than she had ever imagined. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Clara took a moment to reflect. The barn, the horses, the storm, it had all tested her, pushed her to her limits and taught her resilience. She realized that life on Cedar Creek Ranch was not just about physical work. It was about patience, courage, and understanding the world around her. Every animal, every gust of wind, every drop of rain was a lesson in itself. Jed finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "You did well today," he said. "Storms, restless horses, unexpected challenges, you handled them all. That's not something everyone can do." Clara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. The praise, simple and understated, meant more than she could express. She knew that the summer ahead would bring more storms, more challenges, and more lessons, but she also knew she was ready. As they walked back toward the main house, the barn settled quietly behind them, the animals grazing or resting peacefully. Clara felt a sense of belonging she hadn't known before. Cedar Creek Ranch was no longer just a place of work or challenge. It was a place of growth, learning, and discovery. She realized that the trials she faced were not obstacles but opportunities to become stronger, braver, and more capable. By the time they reached the porch of the main house, the sky had darkened into twilight, and the first stars were beginning to twinkle overhead. Clara took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and challenge, and she had emerged stronger. The bond she was forming with Jed, built on trust and shared effort, felt solid and reassuring. As Clara settled in for the evening, she reflected on the day's events. The barn, the storm, and the animals had tested her in ways she had never imagined. Yet, through patience, courage, and determination, she had learned to face those challenges with confidence. She understood now that the ranch demanded respect and attention, but it also offered rewards, growth, strength, and a deep connection to the land and its creatures. For the first time, Clara felt fully at home at Cedar Creek Ranch. The summer was just beginning, and she knew that more challenges lay ahead. But she also knew that she was ready to face them, guided by experience, determination, and the quiet mentorship of Jed, the rancher who had taught her not only about animals and land but also about courage and resilience. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of dew-soaked grass. Clara woke before sunrise, her muscles still pleasantly sore from the previous day's work, but her spirit was bright with anticipation. Cedar Creek Ranch had begun to feel like home, a place of challenge, learning, and quiet triumphs. Today, Jed had planned a long ride across the western pastures, a test not just of stamina but of trust, skill, and the bond between rancher and assistant. Clara dressed quickly, tucking her hair beneath her hat and tightening her boots, ready for the day ahead. Jed was already in the yard, tending to the horses. His movements were deliberate and calm, a rhythm that Clara had come to recognize as the signature of experience. The horses shifted and stamped under his watchful eye, their energy contained by his steady presence. Clara approached, a mixture of excitement and nervousness tightening her chest. "Good morning," she said quietly. Jed nodded, acknowledging her greeting without breaking his focus. Morning, "Ready for the ride?" Clara nodded, feeling a flutter of nerves. "Yes, sir." Jed glanced over at her, his eyes briefly meeting hers. "We'll start with the trail horses. I'll need you to guide the younger ones. Keep them in line and remember, patience and confidence." Horses can sense hesitation. Clara swallowed, her palms slightly sweaty, but she had learned to steady herself over the past days. She followed him toward the stables, noting the careful way he selected saddles, checked straps, and assessed each horse's condition. Every motion was precise, a combination of practicality and experience that Clara admired silently. Once the horses were saddled and ready, Jed mounted his own, a strong, steady bay mare. Clara took her place on a smaller, younger horse, a colt she had grown comfortable with over the last week. The two of them rode side by side as Jed guided the way, leading the herd toward the western pastures. The sun had risen fully now, bathing the land in a warm golden light, and the open plain stretched endlessly before them, dotted with hills and clusters of trees. Clara felt a thrill of freedom. The wind on her face, the rhythm of the horse beneath her, and the vastness of the landscape made her feel alive in a way she had never known in the town. As they moved further from the ranch buildings, Jed began giving Clara small tasks. She was to guide the younger horses, keeping them calm and in formation, and to observe the herd for signs of distress or fatigue. Clara concentrated, recalling Jed's instructions about posture, voice, and timing. The horses responded to her with subtle cues, the flick of an ear, a shift of weight, and she learned to anticipate their movements. It was exhausting but exhilarating. The ride continued for several hours, with Jed teaching Clara the subtleties of ranch life. He explained how to read the land, which grasses were safe to graze, where water might be found, and how to spot potential hazards like hidden rocks or uneven terrain. Clara listened intently, absorbing every detail, impressed by the depth of knowledge required to manage a ranch effectively. Each instruction seemed small, but together they formed a comprehensive understanding of life on Cedar Creek. At midday, they paused near a small creek that wound its way through the pasture. The water was clear and cold, and the horses drank thirstily while Clara refilled her own water bottle. Jed took a moment to inspect the herd, noting any signs of fatigue or discomfort. Clara watched him quietly, noting his focus and the gentle way he handled each animal. It was clear that his respect for the horses was mutual. They trusted him, and he respected them in return. Clara realized that this was a key lesson for herself. Trust was earned through patience, consistency, and respect, whether between humans or animals. As they rested, Jed spoke for the first time in several minutes. "You're doing well," he said quietly. Clara's heart lifted at the rare praise. It was understated but sincere. "Thank you, sir," she replied, feeling a sense of pride that warmed her chest. Jed nodded once, then fell silent again, returning his attention to the herd. Clara appreciated the simplicity of it. On the ranch, words were measured, actions carried weight. The second half of the ride proved more challenging. A sudden gust of wind stirred the grass and startled a few of the younger horses. Clara felt her heart race as she guided them, keeping her movements steady and her voice calm. Jed rode close, his presence reassuring. Together, they managed to keep the herd on course, navigating uneven terrain and shallow gullies. Clara felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She was not only learning, she was applying her knowledge under pressure, and the results were tangible. During a brief stop on a small hill, Clara looked out over the expanse of Cedar Creek Ranch. The land was breathtaking, a mix of rolling hills, clusters of trees, and open pastures. The wind carried the scent of grass and rain, and the distant sound of cattle lowing added to the serenity of the moment. Clara felt a deep connection to the land, to the animals, and even to Jed. It was a bond built on shared effort, trust, and respect, and it gave her a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Jed used the moment to share stories of his past experiences on the ranch, tales of challenges overcome, lessons learned, and the unpredictable nature of life in the Wild West. Clara listened, captivated. Each story carried a lesson, a nugget of wisdom that made her understand the complexities of ranch life. She realized that the work was not just about physical labor. It was about observation, patience, and decision-making. Every day brought new challenges, and every challenge offered an opportunity to grow stronger and more capable. As the afternoon wore on, Clara and Jed encountered a minor crisis. One of the older mares had wandered too close to a rocky slope, and there was a risk she might slip. Clara's heart tightened, but she remembered Jed's lessons. Speaking softly, moving deliberately, and using her hands with care, she guided the mare away from danger. Jed assisted when necessary, but he allowed Clara to take the lead. By the time the animal was safely back with the herd, Clara felt a surge of accomplishment. She had faced fear and uncertainty, and had acted decisively and effectively. The ride continued until the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains. The horses were tired but content, and Clara's muscles ached pleasantly from the exertion. Jed guided the herd back toward the ranch, giving Clara the opportunity to relax her mind and enjoy the ride. She marveled at the beauty of the land, the strength of the horses, and the sense of achievement she felt. Cedar Creek Ranch was no longer intimidating. It was a place of learning, growth, and discovery. Back at the ranch, the evening chores awaited. Clara helped Jed unsaddle the horses, groom them, and secure them in their stalls. The mare that had been restless earlier now stood quietly, her breathing steady, and Clara felt a sense of pride. She had not only managed the challenges of the ride, but had contributed to the well-being of the animals. Jed observed her work with a quiet nod, acknowledging her efforts in his understated way. After the chores, Clara took a moment to rest on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills. The sky was painted in hues of orange, pink, and purple, and the air carried the faint scent of grass and evening dew. She reflected on the day's events, the challenges faced, the lessons learned, and the bond she had formed with both the animals and Jed. She realized that the summer at Cedar Creek Ranch was shaping her in ways she had never imagined. She was stronger, more confident, and more capable than she had been when she first arrived. Jed joined her on the porch, offering a quiet comment about the day's work. "You've done well," he said simply. Clara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. The praise was rare but meaningful. It was a reminder that effort, patience, and courage were recognized, even if not always spoken aloud. The ranch operated on a system of actions and results, and Clara was beginning to understand its rhythms. As night fell, Clara retreated to her small room in the main house, her body tired but her mind active. She thought about the day, the ride, the challenges, and the lessons. Cedar Creek Ranch had become more than a place of work. It was a place of growth, learning, and discovery. She realized that each day brought new opportunities to test herself, to learn, and to strengthen her bond with the land, the animals, and the people who lived there. Clara drifted off to sleep with a sense of anticipation for the days ahead. The summer was far from over, and she knew that more challenges, adventures, and lessons awaited. But she also knew that she was ready. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and responsibility, and had emerged stronger and more confident. The bond she was forming with Jed, built on trust, respect, and shared effort, gave her a sense of belonging she had never known. As the stars twinkled over Cedar Creek Ranch, Clara understood that she was no longer just a visitor or a helper. She was part of the land, part of the work, and part of the quiet, enduring rhythm of life on the ranch. And with that realization, she felt a deep sense of peace, determination, and excitement for the adventures that lay ahead. The final days of summer approached, and Cedar Creek Ranch was alive with the quiet rhythm of work and preparation. Clara woke early, as she had every morning since arriving, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and anticipation. The ranch had become more than a place of work. It had become a part of her, shaping her in ways she had never expected. The sun rose over the rolling hills, casting golden light over the pastures, and Clara felt a sense of peace as she stepped outside. Jed was already tending to the horses, moving among them with the calm precision that Clara had grown to admire. He glanced at her briefly, a subtle nod acknowledging her presence. Today, there was no pressing crisis, no storm or restless horse, just the slow, steady work of preparing the ranch for the upcoming change of seasons. Clara joined him, her movements confident and assured, a reflection of the growth she had experienced over the summer. Their first task was to check the fences along the northern boundary. Clara had learned to anticipate weak posts, to notice signs of wear, and to repair minor damage before it became a serious problem. Jed observed her closely, offering guidance only when necessary, letting her take the lead. As they worked, they spoke quietly, sharing observations about the land, the animals, and even the small joys of life on the ranch. Clara felt a deep sense of camaraderie, not just with Jed, but with the land itself. By mid-morning, they moved to the pastures to inspect the cattle. The herd was calm, grazing under the warm sun. Clara guided them gently, her confidence evident in the way she moved among the animals. She remembered the early days of her summer, when even the simplest tasks had seemed daunting. Now, she handled each situation with skill and assurance. Jed watched silently, occasionally offering a word of praise, his steady presence a reminder of the lessons she had learned. As they worked, Clara reflected on the growth she had experienced. She had learned patience, courage, and resilience. She had faced storms, restless animals, and unfamiliar challenges, and she had emerged stronger for it. The bond she had formed with Jed was built on mutual respect and trust, and it had guided her through the most difficult moments. She realized that these lessons were not just about ranch life. They were lessons she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Late in the afternoon, Jed suggested a break. They sat on a small hill overlooking the ranch, the sun casting long shadows over the pastures. Clara took a deep breath, enjoying the calm and beauty of the landscape. Jed spoke quietly, sharing stories of past summers, of challenges faced and overcome. Clara listened intently, appreciating the wisdom in his words. She realized that the ranch was more than a place of labor. It was a place of learning, growth, and reflection. As the sun began to set, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara and Jed returned to the barn to tend the horses. The animals were calm and content, a reflection of the care and attention they had received throughout the summer. Clara moved among them confidently, checking water troughs, grooming, and ensuring their comfort. Jed assisted when necessary, but largely allowed Clara to take responsibility, a sign of the trust he had in her abilities. Evening fell over Cedar Creek Ranch, and the work of the day concluded. Clara stood on the porch of the main house, looking out over the land she had come to love. The vast pastures, the rolling hills, and the quiet barns held memories of challenges overcome and lessons learned. She thought about the storms, the restless horses, and the long hours of labor. Each moment had tested her, shaped her, and taught her something valuable. Jed approached, breaking the silence. "You've done well this summer," he said simply. "Not everyone can handle what you have. The land, the animals, the work, it's not easy, but you've grown and you've earned your place here." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. His words, though understated, carried immense meaning. She realized that the summer had transformed her, teaching her strength, resilience, and confidence in ways she had never imagined. They walked together toward the barn one last time for the evening checks. Clara ensured that each horse was secure, that the water troughs were full, and that the gates were properly latched. Jed observed silently, occasionally guiding her hands or offering a tip, but largely letting her complete the tasks herself. Clara felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had earned not only Jed's trust, but also a profound understanding of the rhythm and responsibilities of ranch life. After finishing the barn duties, Clara and Jed sat outside, the night sky stretching endlessly above them. Stars twinkled in the clear darkness, and the air was cool and calm. Clara reflected on the summer, the challenges, the lessons, and the friendships she had formed. She realized that Cedar Creek Ranch had taught her more than she could have imagined. It had taught her about patience, responsibility, and the strength of character required to face life's challenges. Jed spoke quietly, breaking her reverie. "The ranch changes people," he said. "It teaches you to observe, to listen, and to act with care. It teaches you that strength is not just physical, but also patience and understanding. You've learned that this summer, Clara." She nodded, feeling the truth in his words. The ranch had become a teacher, Jed a mentor, and the animals her companions. Each day had been a lesson, and each lesson had helped her grow. As the night deepened, Clara felt a sense of closure. The summer was ending, and soon she would return to her town, carrying with her the experiences and lessons of Cedar Creek Ranch. She thought about the early days, when the vast land had seemed overwhelming, the storms frightening, and the animals unpredictable. Now she saw the same land as familiar and comforting, the storms as challenges she could face, and the animals as companions she had learned to understand and care for. The final morning arrived, and Clara prepared to leave the ranch. She packed her belongings carefully, each item a reminder of the summer's experiences. She took one last walk through the pastures, observing the land with a mixture of love and respect. The barn stood quiet in the early light, the horses grazing peacefully. Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons, the growth, and the friendships she had formed. Jed approached as she finished her walk. "You've done well," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I hope you carry these lessons with you, wherever life takes you." Clara nodded, her eyes glistening with quiet emotion. "I will, sir," she replied. "I've learned more than I could have imagined, and I'm grateful for everything." Before she left, Clara walked to each horse, brushing them gently and whispering words of farewell. She had formed bonds with these animals over the summer, understanding their moods, anticipating their needs, and earning their trust. Each touch, each gesture, was a reminder of the lessons she had learned about patience, care, and respect. As she mounted her horse for the final ride back to the town road, Clara glanced at Jed one last time. He nodded, a simple gesture that conveyed both approval and pride. She felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had known. Cedar Creek Ranch had changed her, not just in skill or confidence, but in spirit. She had faced challenges, learned to act with courage, and discovered a strength within herself that she had never known. The ride home was quiet, filled with reflection. Clara observed the land, noticing details she had overlooked in the early days. The way the morning sun glinted off dew-covered grass, the gentle sway of the trees in the breeze, the distant hills rolling endlessly toward the horizon. Each sight reminded her of the lessons she had learned, the experiences she had lived, and the growth she had achieved. By the time she reached the edge of the town, Clara felt a sense of closure and fulfillment. The summer at Cedar Creek Ranch had ended, but the lessons, memories, and growth would stay with her forever. She realized that life was full of challenges, but that patience, courage, and determination could guide her through even the most difficult moments. As Clara dismounted and prepared to return home, she turned for one last look at Cedar Creek Ranch. The barn stood quietly in the fading light, the pastures stretched endlessly, and the horses grazed peacefully. She felt a profound gratitude for the land, the animals, and for Jed, whose quiet guidance had helped her grow stronger and more confident. Clara walked down the road toward her town, her steps steady and her heart full. She carried with her the spirit of Cedar Creek Ranch, the lessons of courage, patience, and resilience, and a newfound confidence in her own abilities. The summer had ended, but her journey of growth and discovery would continue, guided by the experiences and wisdom she had gained. As the sun set behind the distant hills, Clara felt a sense of peace. She had faced challenges, learned valuable lessons, and grown in ways she could never have imagined. Cedar Creek Ranch had become a part of her, shaping her spirit, her confidence, and her understanding of the world. And as she walked toward home, she knew that the lessons of the ranch, the bond with the animals, and the mentorship of Jed would remain with her forever, guiding her through every challenge that life might bring.